High School for 2 years. With her academic capacity, she was transferred to Palmerston Girls High School to become the head of the mathematics department, where she co-authored 6 mathematics textbooks in cooperation with Cambridge University Press. Her academic pursuits continue as she completed her postgraduate diploma in mathematics education. Anchored by her expertise and passion for academe and student development, she was later promoted as deputy principal. Her dedication to learning continued to brazen her passion in mentoring when she earned her master's degree in education at Massey University, New Zealand. At present, she really has proven to be a dynamic professional with her continuous commitment to promote learning and development. Among her responsibilities is to oversight their international department and the New Zealand qualification for teachers and schools. Indeed, our speaker shines beyond the confines of the academic world and mentorship. Over the last few years, she focuses her journey on developing her coaching and mentoring skills to grow leadership in both students and teachers. It is indeed our honor joining us to share her wisdom on revitalizing the educational process in the post-pandemic era, strategies and best practices. Let's welcome Miss Anna Brookie from New Zealand.
Kia ora koutou, everyone. Thank you for that lovely introduction. And I have to say, just listening to the opening speeches, I am also inspired by the words that have been said from the people before me. So first of all, I'm very humbled to be considered and asked to speak at your conference today. So thank you very much to Teacher Alec. And as you saw, we met in March this year, my first trip to Thailand, to Bangkok, which I absolutely loved. And I'm looking forward to hopefully traveling there next year. And we were talking about education and the challenges that we're facing in New Zealand and the challenges that you're facing in the English medium internationally. And we found that we actually had quite a bit in common, a lot to do with the opportunities that lay ahead and also the challenges we've had with COVID. So just before I do start, I just would like to say that if I start talking too fast, please put something in the chat, because sometimes, especially in New Zealand, it's a thing that we speak very quickly. And also I get very excited about what I want to share with you today. So please make sure that you just put something into the chat to say slow down. So can you just bear with me while I share my screen? It has been a while since we've been working online. So let me just allow Zoom to... I knew I should have tested this beforehand.
Take your time, don't worry, it's fine.
Oh, I'm just trying to find, I've got something up behind, but I'm just trying to find it. I've got to open system preferences. Oh no. Security. I've got to go to security.
Miss Anna, would you like us to give you like 5 minutes?
Yeah, the thing, we just had a new IT system put into place a few weeks ago, and so there's been some things shut down. Yeah, can you give me 5 minutes, Alec?
Maybe what we could do is we could play a short video and give you 5 minutes to prepare and then come back. Is that
Yeah,
okay?
that
Yeah.
sounds good.
Could we play the video to show a bit of background behind the teachers on our program? Could we do that first? Teacher Rico, do you have that video? We do need to keep the schedule a little bit flexible, but maybe we'll just have to shorten one of the speeches for the talkers today. But can we now introduce once again, to start again, can we introduce Anna Brookie, please?
Yeah. My apologies, everyone, and thank you for being so patient while I got myself organised. I'm in school and there's no one else here to help me with the IT. But anyway, let's get started. And Alec, I am happy to shorten mine down a bit, but let's see how we go. Title today is Where Are We At? What are our next steps? And how do we know? Next, please. So just to clarify and go through, what is the purpose of my presentation? It's first of all for us to explore the concept of equity versus equality. And I've noticed in the opening speeches that we've had quite a bit discussion around equality and catering for the needs of all students. So I just thought we would do a little bit of a starter activity in a moment, just to get us thinking about that and how it impacts our classroom. And the second thing that I'd like to do today and share with you is a framework for evaluation. And this, there's many teacher inquiry models out there. If you Google it, there's thousands of images. There's so much out there. The one that I'd like to share with you today, it's not set in stone, but it also can be used for a school-wide evaluative approach. It could be used for a department or for a group of teachers who would like to do some evaluation into their practices. And it also can be used for you as individual teachers. So you're wanting to evaluate and review and reflect on what it is you're doing and what you can do differently, then this framework will work for you as well. Next, please. So what are the outcomes of the presentation for you today? As I've said, to reflect, to think, and to wonder about how might you strengthen your evaluation processes, both in your classroom and also school-wide. So that's our outcome for the presentation today, hopefully. Next, please. So here's our plan. I know that there was a great introduction of just before, but I would like to share with you a few other little bits so that you can get to know with the perspective of where I'm coming from in relation to my family, to where I live in New Zealand. And also I'd just like to talk a little bit about the school that I'm from as well. Then we've got an activity reflection around that equity versus equality. And then I will take you through an evaluative process that you could use within your schools. And then finally, we will just do a little bit of reflection as we tie things up and then take the Q&A. So introductions, first of all. Next slide. So just some photos of my teenage or my boys or my family. And please don't tell them that I've shared with you the photo. They would be not happy with me at all. So my husband, Barry, is a carpenter or a builder in Palmerston North, and my oldest son Max, he's with the glasses. He is studying security studies at Massey University. So he's studying border patrol and intelligence, international security, and he's also thinking of maybe going into the police force. And my younger son Ash, who is the tallest of us all, he is leaving school next year to go to film school in Auckland and study to get into the film industry. And as you can see, I have two little dogs. The white one is called Alfie, and Lewis is the black dog. They're both princesses and drive me nuts and follow me all around the house. Now that the teenage boys are about leaving, I now have the dogs to keep me company. So next slide, please. So I'm from Palmerston North, which you can probably see just above Wellington. It is a town of about 90,000. And we're known as an academic hub within New Zealand. So we have Massey University, which is one of the biggest universities in New Zealand in town, though majority of their students are extramural or they study from a distance, and they also have campuses other places in New Zealand. So we also are a hub. We have an IPU college and we have many research-based institutions that are set up in Palmerston North. And some of these photos, the bottom two photos is I've got this photo while I've been out walking along our river. So we are centered around a river goes through our town. So that's just a little bit about where I'm from. Very central into New Zealand. We're 2 hours to Wellington, which is our capital, and off to the coast in Hawke's Bay, where it's wine country. We're 2 hours from there as well. Next. So the school that I teach at, as it's been mentioned, I have been teaching for just about 30 years, and I am back, and I say I'm back at Palmerston North Girls High School because I'm also an ex-student from there, and also my mother went to Palmerston North Girls High School. So there's a huge amount of tradition within the school. It's over 100 years old. We are a girls-only school, and this tends to be quite popular within New Zealand, where we have single-sex education, and we also have co-ed education. And this seems to be really, really popular in New Zealand. In just about every town, there is a boys' and a girls' school. Our school, we have about 1,250 students from years 9 to 13, so aged from about 13 to 18. We have about 80 staff within our school, with also 40 support staff, so about 120 staff altogether. We're very multicultural. We have 50% of our students are European, about 20% are Māori, and just under 10% are Pasifika students. And we also have a wide variety of other nationalities and ethnicities from around the world. At the moment, we are looking at resetting our strategic focus going into the future, sort of that post-COVID space. But as has been talked about, one of the key areas for me is curriculum and assessment. One of the really interesting spaces I'm working in is our international department. So we have around 26, equivalent of 26 international students from China, Japan, Thailand, South Korea, Vietnam, and we are really looking to re-establish those relationships overseas and re-establish that. Post-COVID, pre-COVID, we had about 40 international students. So this is something that's fairly new for me in terms of the oversight and re-establishing that space within our school, which is very exciting. The other thing that I work on is the professional learning for teachers. So we have a cohesive plan that we roll out within our school on professional learning. And we have some time where we actually send our students home early, called our PLD time, where we offer a variety of different things. And one of the things we're focusing on recently is teachers teaching teachers. So utilising and using the expertise within our school, because we have a huge amount of expertise within our 80 staff and also in our near school community as well. So as already mentioned, there are probably three key things that have been the most amazing and the best professional learning that I could ever ask for as a teacher. And one of those was writing and being involved in writing textbooks, as already mentioned. The second thing was doing that sort of that further education, which I never ever thought I would do. And the focus, my professional inquiry, was on curriculum review, which was what we were doing within our school at the time. But most recently, I'm currently working with ERO, and ERO is the Education Review Office, which is a government department within New Zealand. And their role is to go out to school, every single school in New Zealand, and check that we are compliant with the Education Act that's in place, and also to support school on evaluation and their evaluation processes within their school. And so I work closely with an evaluative partner and I have the privilege of going into schools around near this region, having a look at what they do and how they do things, which has been the most amazing professional learning for me, especially since I've been at Girls High for quite a long time. So the presentation that I have from here is very much based on the Aero work and the resources that we use when working for Aero with schools. So I thought that they would be really useful, hopefully really useful to you. They are very much based on research. Aero have a research department within that their job solely is to gather and look at the research, particularly in New Zealand schools. So that's just a little bit about me, my family, where I live, and also the school that I am teaching in. So let's jump into it. Next, please. So one of the things that we were talking when we were at Alex's school was some of the challenges that we're facing as we're coming out of COVID and sort of looking at our new normal, is what I call it, or post-COVID. Some of the key things at our school and in New Zealand that have been challenges are engagements of students in their learning. So in New Zealand, we had quite a lot of lockdowns and for quite a long period. So students' engagements, probably some of our students thrived under that online learning, and some of our students really, really struggled, and it affected their engagement. They really missed the teacher support and the peer support. So one of the things we're facing in New Zealand schools is engagement of students' learning. The second thing is on the students' learning strategies, on how they learn, what strategies do they have for learning, having a growth mindset within their learning. We tend to find that students can give up very easily, particularly in maths. I see it as a maths teacher where they'll try to do a question and, I can't do it, so I'm going to give up. So looking at developing our students' learning strategies. Attendance. It's a national thing in New Zealand that our attendance figures have dropped. And this is partly due to COVID. It's also about getting back into routines. Also, our borders have opened. And so, we often have families who travel overseas during school time. So we've got many challenges around attendance. And of course, linked to all of that is the well-being of students. So when society is heightened and struggled as it did all over the world during COVID times, then obviously in schools we see that it comes in through our students with their needs, and we see a difference. So that term of equity is really, really versus equality is probably more so important now than it ever has been, probably pre-COVID, because we're getting students coming in with such diverse needs that actually we need to be responsive. So while COVID has also presented some challenges, let's not forget the opportunities that it's presented. So for us, and in particular in our school, during COVID times, we had to throw everything out the window and we had to pivot. We had to change things up. We couldn't run prize givings because we had restrictions in place. We couldn't run the events, school events that we wanted to run. Some of them had to be cancelled. Some of them had to be reshaped. So what that actually allowed us to do is think about doing things differently, because sometimes in schools we want to keep doing the same thing time and time again. And we had to change because we were forced to change because of the restrictions we had. So what that opportunity has created is that staff, students in our school community are more responsive to change. So that has allowed us, particularly in our school, to put some significant changes moving forward, because things are different and things are going to be different as we move forward. So while we've had some challenges, let's also not forget the opportunities we've had, and let's embrace them. So while we've been managing COVID in New Zealand, we're also going through a huge change in our curriculum. We're going through significant changes in our qualification of NCEA, and those timelines have been delayed due to COVID. And the other thing that we're going through is looking at a real big focus on being culturally responsive within our classroom. So those three things are providing an opportunity, but also something that we've got to think about, and we're navigating through schools in New Zealand at the moment. So hopefully that just gives you a little bit of background. So let's keep moving. Thank you. So let's just take a pause, and hopefully you might have some note paper or something to the side. I'd like to ask you two questions, and it's a really good. Let's actually just do that individually. It's really hard to do the sharing on Zoom, but so for you, when you look at this picture, what is the difference? What do you see as the difference between equality and equity? So that's the first question. The second question is, what's the impact of this in your classroom or your school? And if some of you are being brave and would like to pop that in the chat, feel free. But I also understand that if you'd like to just do that personally, then please go ahead. And I'll just give you a couple of minutes to do that. Thank you. Just go back a slide if that's okay to the picture. Thank you. If anyone feels brave and would like to pop into the chat.
Questions in the chat. So if anyone wants to answer those questions, feel free, guys.
Feel free, but I also appreciate that this might be something you'd like to do individually.
Would you like some answers, Miss Anna?
I'm actually okay that if they don't, because I do think it can be confronting. I know the first time when I saw this picture, I really struggled with it. So I'm okay if it's a personal thing. But I'm challenging everybody out there to have a go at answering the two questions and to reflect on this. Yeah. It might be something that you take back to your school, that a group of teachers, you would like to show the picture, have a chat, have a think about it, have a talk around that, share ideas. I know personally when I saw this picture a few years ago, I really struggled with the concept of, well, actually, I treat all of my students the same, and isn't that what I'm supposed to do? So the challenge around that equity, particularly in COVID times, is that we're getting such a range of students with really diverse needs coming through. And actually, we need to think about catering for our students. So next slide, thanks, Alec. So, you can Google the internet. You can have a look at definitions and between the equality and equity. What I really like about the equity, just keeping it really simple, is that focus on the individual and what are their needs to be successful. And that could be different between individuals. So I think I've seen in New Zealand a shift in education of, here's my class and I'm going to treat everybody the same, to what are the individual needs of my students and what do I need to do differently in here. Yeah. So it's just something for us to reflect on. Next slide. So let's get into the evaluation framework for you. And as I said, I have a disclaimer that I'd just like to make very clear. It is not to say that all of you have to use this framework. I think my intention is that maybe you take a couple of pieces out of it, you take some of the key questions to add already to your knowledge. So all of the models, there's teacher inquiry models, there's curriculum review processes out there. They all have a lot in common. Probably some of the differences is where they focus and the way that they focus. But I also would like to say that the framework that I'm using has come from ERO, the Education Review Office in New Zealand. And they do their model based on a set of questions, which I found really useful personally. So that's what I'd like to share with you today. Okay, next slide, thanks. I do quite like to avoid definitions where possible. However, for the purpose of this framework, I think it was quite important for me to explain or define what the evaluation means within this framework. I have shared this PowerPoint with Alec, and the link to the document that schools use in New Zealand is in the notes of this. So let's just pull apart this definition briefly to look at some of the key pieces out of here. I think the first key word is looking at systematic. So what we find in New Zealand schools is that quite often we make decisions and we want to tweak things. So often can be a last minute, it'd be a really good idea if we just changed this with what we're doing. And so my question is, has that been systematic? Has there been a set framework with it? So rather than kind of being reactive, let's turn that around to be proactive. And so this is the framework that I'd like to share. I often call it tinkering. So we kind of go, let's just try and doing this, but what is that based on? And it doesn't always line up with some of the principles of change management as well. So one of the key words to me is systematic. The second one is around that this encompasses, you can see that it encompasses not just the teacher, it covers your programs, the curriculum, it could be school-wide, it could be individual. So this evaluation model, as I've already stated, is all-encompassing. It outlines a process of data collection, analysing the data, and making informed decisions. And the decisions are based on evidence. It's always good, and one note is it's always really good in this process to really focus on the strengths of the school. I think we're always with schools, we're wanting to go, what do we need to change and what do we need to do differently? And one thing that ERO focuses on quite a bit is what are your strengths within your school? What are your strengths as an individual teacher? Because there's often things that we can take from those strengths to apply to when we need to look at the areas of development as well. And actually, ultimately, aren't we all here today and every day to improve the outcomes of our learners? Okay, next slide. Thank you. So we know in the teacher inquiry, we've got cycles, we've got circles. We know that there isn't just a timeline, that it's an ever-changing circle. And so you can see the model where we usually start with noticing, we go to investigating, collaborative sense-making, prioritizing to take action, and monitoring and evaluating the impact. And so it keeps continuing. And everything that we do in that space is learner focused. So let me just take you through just each of those parts. So thank you, Alec. We'll start with noticing. So for each of the stages, I've got a series of questions, and these are really good starting points for you as a school, as an individual teacher, or a group of teacher. So the noticing means the scanning, being aware of, we kind of call it the itchy scratchy. I wonder, there's something happening here, but I'm not quite sure what. Recognizing and defining the focus and the purpose for what you're evaluating. And this also could include what success might look like. So what are the principles that are going to guide your evaluation as well? This is quite a good opportunity to actually stop and have a think about what are we actually doing really well? Who is that working for? Which of our learners is that working for? And there are lots of good things and lots of good frameworks that you can use in this space. For example, the international department, we've just done a SWOT analysis because we're reinventing and reshaping that space. We wanted to dig deep and have a look at what is going well, what are our opportunities, what are our barriers. So there are different tools that you can use in this noticing space. So I really like the questions here, which can kind of guide your thinking if they're helpful for you. And this is just I wonder kind of space, scanning what's happening at the moment. Okay, next slide, thanks. Investigating. So just when I talk about data, or it's not intended that it is numerical data, the collection of data for me, and when I use that word, is all-encompassing. So it's any pieces of information that we can collect. And that could be from a variety of different ways. So some of the things to think about is, you know, how might we collect the data? Who are we asking? And what perspectives are we gathering within that space? So a couple of things that we learned from our curriculum review in this space was we were very good at wanting to do Google Forms. I'm not sure if that's the same for you. We send out Google Forms to our students. We collect some questions that we ask them, and we analyze that data. And we still use that format for in a number of different ways because it's still a useful tool. What we did find is setting together some focus groups for students and for teachers. So that was putting a group of 10 to 15 students or teachers, we tended to keep them separate, posing them with some ideas of some things that we might want to do or we might want to change, and then letting them discuss and bounce off each other. And that we found exceptionally powerful in that space. It was different to Google Forms because they were able to listen to each other and collaborate on solving or their thinking in that space. That was something that the Google Form did not offer. Another thing, for example, that we found when going out to parents was have something to go out to them about, because it can be quite tricky if you ask open questions like, for example, what is it you would like our curriculum to reflect, or what would you like your student to correct? Sorry, a colleague's just come in on a Sunday and she's just waving to me. And the best question out of all of this when you're collecting information is, how do you know? So students would like to have a subject introduced, for example. How do you know? How do you know that? Because sometimes as teachers and leaders, we assume things for our learners. So how do you know is a really good question to ask yourself. Next question. Next slide, sorry. Collaborative sense making. Look at the data with an open mind, because there are possibilities that might come into light from the gathering the information that you've never thought of. And actually, in terms of our curriculum review, there were things that came out of that curriculum review that I would never have anticipated at the start. But through the process, it came to light. So have an open mind. And then another question to think about is, who will you involve in that sense making? And I would encourage you to have the students involved with that. That was one thing that we did with our curriculum review, was we brought students onto the committee and they were involved with all aspects of that review. And I wish I'd done that earlier. So who's going to be involved? How can you involve the parents in that sense making, looking at the information, deciding on the next steps? Next slide. Prioritizing the actions to take. Often in schools, again, and I'm talking about our school and schools in New Zealand, we're very, very quick to put in a whole lot of actions. Let's try this and this and this and this. My question is, how do you know that that action is going to have an impact on the learners. So taking time to actually look at the different actions that could happen, that could be done, but see if you can work out which actions would have the most impact to the learners. Which one would have the biggest? Yeah, we're very good in New Zealand at racing and doing a whole lot of different stuff, but actually they don't always have the impact on the learners that we would hoped it would be. So plan out the actions. It might be done over time. So implementation may be in stages. It could be a pilot with a small group of teachers and a small group of students so that you can actually grow that space. You can learn from the mistakes before it gets rolled out to everybody else within your school. It could be in the classroom that you test it with a small group of students, gather their insights, and then make adjustments to the next steps. And one thing also for school leaders within the space is how can you in these processes grow teachers and grow their leadership within this process. Next slide. I think there's just one question I'd like to sum up with monitoring and the evaluation of the impact is how do you know? So if something has been really successful, how do you know? If something has not been successful, how do you know? So there's a whole lot of starter questions within that slide that could be useful, but I think the one summary question is, how do you know? Okay.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Before we go into the reflections, I was just trying to see if there was any slides, any comments actually, and because that sort of encompasses that evaluation framework. And my next slides are going into reflections. And I've just got a final quote to end things off. So I don't know if there's any questions, Alec. Is there time for questions?
I don't think there's a question. There was some comments earlier about what is the difference between equality and equity.
Yes, and I've had a read of those and they look spot on. That's great.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing. Sameness and fairness. Yeah, thank you. Nobody is set aside.
Could I ask you a question quickly?
Sure.
I was really fascinated by when you were introducing about your school, and you mentioned that in nearly every town they have a boys and girls high school. So that was very interesting. How many schools do you have in your town in total?
Oh, good question. So we have Palmerston North Girls High and Boys High. Awatapu, probably all up about 8 or 9. So the majority of our high schools, Boys High is the biggest, so that's about 1,800. Majority of our high schools in Palmerston North are sort of around the 1,000 mark. Some are sort of from about 500 to about 1,500. So, and we're a town of 90,000. Yeah.
Okay, so smaller school sizes. I think our school here is nearly 3,000 students.
Yeah. So the biggest school in New Zealand is 3,200, and that's in Auckland. So the majority of our high schools in New Zealand are probably sitting around between 500 and 1,500 to 2,000. So a lot of our schools are a bit smaller. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. I will, if we can get any questions, maybe I can send them to you later. And also we will make your slides available to our participants.
Yeah. So can we just finish the couple of last slides?
Yeah, sure.
Then I'll be done. Yeah. And that's 3:01. So that's good time. So, and this can be an activity not to be done now, but in response to the presentation, and Alex said that he will share that with you, it's really good to have a look at some reflections individually in your school with other people who have been at the conference. What are your wonderings and insights about that evaluation process and framework, and what are your actions and your next steps? Because I know it's awesome to be a part of conferences, and then we go back to school into the everydayness of things that happen. And so it's really good. One thing I've tried to do when I've been to a conference is to set some actions and some really small steps. It might be 1 or 2 things that I can do in response to what my learnings are. And then the next slide, we've got 2 more. So the purpose of the presentation, I just want to come back to that, is to explore the concept of equity and equality, and to look at a framework for evaluation that could be used in a variety of different ways. So that was our purpose for this presentation. So hopefully it has met your needs as the learner. And last slide. I shared this with my maths class last year. They were 17-year-olds because we were working really intensively on developing their learning strategies. And what they took out of this slide, it's one of my favourite quotes. What they took out of it was their question to me was, Miss Brookie, are you calling us insane? That was their question. So I wasn't calling them insane, but I was encouraging them to make change, That's it, Alec.
Okay, everyone, thank you so much. Give you a round of applause.